Welcome to Talking Business, a podcast produced in Melbourne, Australia. The podcast is available on the Acast site, my own website, the Apple Podcast Store, or wherever you go to get your podcasts. Or you can get it at the Business Acumen website at www.businessacumen.biz or at Banking Day. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from my website, leongettler.com. I am Leon Gettler. My job is to review and monitor the week's news in business, finance and economics. I bring it all to you every week. This is episode number 34 in our series for 2024, and today's date is Friday, September the 20th. First, I'll be talking to Cesar Hasselman, author, mentor, coacher, consultant and a founder of AMH Consultancy that is helping small to medium business owners create success by developing the right culture. And I'll be talking to Rabobank economist Michael Sneesby about what's happening with the Chinese economy and what it means for Australia. But first, let's talk to Cesar Hasselman.
Well, Cesar, tell us about AMH Consultancy and what you do.
Cool. So I help business owners to have a better life, make more money, and get the business to grow or get prepared to sell or get someone to take over.
And so basically you're teaching people how to craft today's business. Is that right?
That's right. And making people be able to create more freedom instead of just creating a job.
So tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, usually as a business owner, we take all the grief and all the risks, and usually we don't take the other side of the coin that's supposed to allow you to have more freedom and more money, or at least allow you to have a better life. I believe that's unfair with people who take the risk for passion, for love, or for a need. Doesn't matter where they come from. But if you take the biggest risk, it's not fair that some of your people start to make more money than you along the way. If you're a business owner, you're actually supposed to have a process in place that allows you to have an asset, to create a good cash flow, to have a better life. Even if in your business, in your industry, it's normal that your team makes more money than you, you're supposed to make enough to be able to be very comfortable with that.
So how do you develop the skills to build long-lasting business relationships?
You're asking about me personally, or you're asking about how the business owner can do that?
How the business owner could do that?
I believe that being a business owner is a journey, right? You have an entrepreneur blood or a specific need. If you can take it away, just a transaction, a relationship, and you can understand what's more than that, around that, and you can understand people, I believe you start to create long-lasting relationship and you start to create a good network. But if you're just looking for the trade, you always worry about your time and everything's about me, then it'll be hard for having good long-lasting relationships.
Right. So it's very much about building the relationship.
Yeah, it's very much that transaction supposed to be a consequence. You can start the relationship with a transaction. That happens with a lot of people in business. But if you keep yourself in only focus on what I can get from that person, it's something that's gonna make the people annoyed, and probably your relationship will not last that long, or you'll be superficial.
So how do you do that?
You usually have things in common, right? Or you have a way to talk. You feel some pleasure in dealing with that person, or because you think similar, or because you do think similar, or because you can share content and information from the industry, or you can trust and rely, or because you have some personal aims, common aims. You need to figure it out. I used to say that when you're going to do a transaction with someone and you walk for the first time in their office, you're not supposed to just look at things superficially. You're supposed to read who they are through what they have. So in your case, Leon, I know you probably very intellectual and probably love to know and read things because your background give me that message. And if you're walking in people's office and you start to read a bit what they have, who they are, how they feel, and the environment talks to you, you can see that you have some syncs. You can see if you have some connections there. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's about getting to know the person.
It's getting to know. You allow the person to be who they are, understanding that you create some limits and boundaries from what you can see. And this is going to make a much pleasure way to deal with it.
And as you say, the transaction is just the consequence of that.
That's completely right.
One of the big issues is when you're setting up a business is, when it's taking up so much of your time, how do you create a work-life balance?
Yeah, you need to understand that every setup or every start or every change will take you away from balance for a while, but you need to understand that will be a period of time. So every time that I have a new client, I tell them probably the next 3 to 6 months, you will gonna work a little bit more and harder that you used to, and you're gonna be more uncomfortable because you are at the place that you are because you're too comfortable with things that the way you're doing it. So right, or you're too uncomfortable and you don't know how to get out of it, one or the other. So when you start to see and face the challenge and you understand and you start to break that down and make that work to you for you, you're gonna work a little bit more with extras for a period of time, but that's never more than 3 to 6 months. And then once that's set up properly, you have your freedom back with much more time and much more potential of growth and money at your disposal, because you start to create the right process and the right boundaries. You start to have the right communication. You start to understand a little bit more about your culture, about your leadership, about the impact of your communication. You start to understand the relationship that you have with your suppliers, the relationship you have with your money, the way that people spend your money. They start to get responsibility on board. They start to understand that the relationship is not about feelings in between people, it's about results and commitment in what they're doing. So it's a lot of things that we need to put it together to be able to arrive in that place. And of course, from the start, you're already not with the balance that you want to. You're just going to get out of that a bit more to be able to arrive there. It's not magic.
And so how do you create a specific business culture for your business?
So it depends of the leadership. If you are a leader who doesn't want to be if you are the owner who doesn't have leader skill or don't want to be the leader or don't want to be the reference, you're gonna treat in a different way how you're gonna manage your culture. But if you are hands-on owner or principal or director, you have 3 to 4 different ways to do leadership, and one of them is by example, which I believe is the easiest one for us to be able to get people on board, because they already see you doing it. They already use you as a reference, a bad one or a good one, depending in how you communicate in your day-to-day with the people that you have. And then from there, we try to understand what's the expectation that the owner have towards to the team, and what the expectation from the team towards the owners and all the management key holders. So from that, we start to understand the culture that they have today to be able to lead them through the gaps that they need to have the best culture that they can build.
How important is culture for your business?
Oh, I believe it's more important than your sales. That's how important culture. Culture is what can drag you up and down. Culture is what people do when you're not present. Culture is what people gonna do as extra without you asking for. Culture is when things are changing and have drama from outside to inside, is what gonna support you to get through it. So a solid culture will get your business in a much better place, and a destructive culture will get you out of your place.
So you would say that when I'm setting up a business, I would have to start with the culture?
If you set up in a business, you have the opportunity to start with all your values, which will become part of your culture. So if you have strong values and needs, and you have strong beliefs, these will become part of your culture if you do it properly. But if that changes at the time that you need to look for more money than to survive than what you're delivering, then your culture will change too. So it's a culture is a day-to-day task. It's not you build that up, and you need to be aware about it. In every time that you bring a new gun, a new person to your business, supposed to be very much the last decision to bring them on board, supposed to be pretty much in this person fits the culture, for better that they are, for as much money they can bring. Is this guy going to destroy, or that girl going to destroy your culture? Because if yes, it's much more expensive for you to fix, and it's better for you to not have them.
So that becomes quite critical in that case.
Oh yeah, I believe so. I will give you some examples. I have a client that we start. He was the son of the owner, and he has an aspiration. He would like to become a business owner. But his first question for me was, how can I take 5 month holiday? That was before he's even having the business. He was still the son of the owner, right? But anyway, we came through a lot of things together. I took the challenge to bring him on board, because my question was for him is, before I answer your question, how much work you'd like to put it in before you get there? And then his answer was 100% of everything that I have. So I said, I can work with that, he wants to have 5 months of holiday, but he will work to be able to get there. Then I can work with it. So we're working together for 9 years now, and he bought his parents out for 900K. And today his business will be evaluated around 15 million. I believe that if you have the aim and you really want to put the effort, you're gonna arrive there. But I'm not sure if I lost myself in your question or
No,
if
no,
I
no,
have
no,
an
no, no,
answer.
no, 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 you did. No, you answered it perfectly. Cesar, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, more than pleasure, Leon. I appreciate that.
And now let's talk to Rabobank economist Michael Every.
Well, Michael, what's your view about China's economy now? The figures are not looking that good.
They're not, but I really think we need to take a step back and try and understand what it is we're looking at. So, growth officially is still reasonably okay, but we see that investment isn't doing too well. Retail spending isn't doing too well. Inflation is extremely low or deflationary, in fact, and producer price inflation, which is much more important in China as a producer than it is in Australia as a consumer, is negative. So you can look at that from a distance, and particularly with the stock market down and the housing market down, and you can say, yep, they're in trouble. Or you can look at the trade figures where imports are pretty much flat. Exports are just still through the roof to a growing range of countries across a growing range of products. And anecdotally, people in sector after sector after sector will tell you they're being flooded by ever cheaper Chinese product. And you can say, is that just a flip side of it? That because the domestic economy is weak, they're exporting more? Or is this actually what they want? Is it what they want? That they don't care about the stock market, they don't care about the housing market, they don't care what we would worry about, which is deflation. They are happy to be producing more and more epic volumes of more and more cheap goods, which will just upend or uproot industrial supply chains in every other global economy to the point where without action, everything will be made in China. I'm exaggerating slightly, but that's the kind of trend that we see. So I'm putting it to you. What do you think? Do you think this is a consumer economy that's gone wrong and they're just trying to offload their excess inventory on us and they don't know what to do? Or is this an economy that people don't want to recognize the validity of because it's so far removed from what they think people should be doing, quote unquote, that it worries them to consider it, which is this is an economy deliberately trying to put everyone else, out of business as much as it can. And it's all just about production.
Well, I think Xi Jinping's economic policy is very much about production and supply to the global economy.
So therefore, if you say that, and I'm not disagreeing, by the way, but it's important to ask that question and answer it. If you take that point of view, please, if I may, answer your own question. Do you think the Chinese economy is doing well or badly?
Well, I think consumer demand is down very strongly. The housing market doesn't look in great shape. And I think there are obviously issues there in terms of how the local and unemployment is high as well. So I think there are obviously issues there.
But if they care about them, and I'm not saying they don't, I want to be abundantly clear here. I'm trying to, start a discussion rather than just, going on for a few minutes. I can do that. I have done that. I'm sure I'll do it again in a minute. But it really behooves anyone looking at China, thinking about China, and interacting with China to ask themselves that question and to stop thinking this is Australia you're looking at with a larger geography and a larger population. What if they don't give a damn about house prices from here? What if they don't give a damn about consumption from here? Now, unemployment, I agree, that would always be a concern for any government. But what if they can manage to, or if they think they can mop that up with more industrial production? So if they double their EV output again, or they double their output of X, Y, Z, or they take another sector. Let's say, for example, they manage to supplant Airbus and Boeing at some point, and all the jumbo jets in the world are made in China too. At what point does one, as a counterparty to a China trade, realize that maybe that's the game? And again, I'm not saying it is, but if one isn't having that conversation, then one is part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Well, then if China sets itself up as a production hub for the global economy, that would create certain tensions with other economies, would it not?
It would, and it is. Obviously, the US has moderate tariffs against China, and Trump is talking about putting them up to triple digits in some respects. Let's see if he wins or not. That's a conversation. Harris will likely retain the tariffs that are there, one would imagine, although, she is a black box. We don't know what policy will come out. If you look at Europe, they're tentatively leaning towards tariffs, but even Germany, who is seeing its own auto industry being eaten alive by China, is lobbying against the tariffs, which is just indicative of something deeply wrong in terms of Germany's mindset, I think. But India, Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, I'm reaching, but I know there are others, Turkey, other large emerging markets, Thailand too, they're on the list, are all either already or contemplating putting up double or triple digit tariffs against Chinese goods. Now, that would be a serious issue for China, because then they have all the problems you're talking about with housing and consumption and unemployment. And then maybe then they can't sell their excess stock on the world. And then what happens?
Well, that creates enormous problems for the Chinese economy, would it not?
It does. Again, I mean, I enjoy this kind of interactive memes or themes. Let me stick with it. What do you think they'll do about it?
It would require a change, surely, of economic policy, would it not? But whether that would get past the CCP and Xi Jinping's Marxist views, I'm not sure.
No, well, I think in terms of Xi Jinping, I think we know what he would say. Absolutely. So therefore, if they can't do that or won't do that, that leaves them only two other options, doesn't it? I mean, one of them is obviously currency depreciation. So you'd see a much weaker renminbi, which would have a flow-through effect right the way around the world and right the way around world markets. That's one option. And the other one is, of course, geopolitically, to make it clear to people that if you don't want to play the trade game, other games can be played. I think it was Bastiat who, a long time ago in Europe, said if goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. And I'm not making any kind of forecast there. I'm looking backwards rather than forwards. But it's a truism in life that if you're going to suddenly say, right, we're not going to let you do what you want to do anymore, any political entity will suddenly say, well, I don't like that, and I intend to let you know I don't like it. And there are lots of ways that can happen. So I've kind of, gone on a few different paths here along with you. But the key point is, again, to try and think about what China is or isn't. And I don't have the answers there, but it's important to keep answering the questions and to really remove ourselves from any, blinkered discussion about housing or consumption, presuming that this is what the economy should be about and will be about. And I really don't know if it is or it will be.
Indeed. And I mean, one of the fundamental issues with Australia is the iron ore price, which has been crashing.
Yes. Now, we are seeing a broad-based commodity drop around the world. And on that front, let me just say that, it's either because the world economy is about to hit a cliff or go off of a cliff. And that's possible, but it's not our house forecast. It's the Chinese economy going off of a cliff. Now, we know consumption is flat, and we know that infrastructure isn't doing much, but we know physical production is growing at a very fast clip. So presumably there's still a lot of commodities that are needed for physical production. So that doesn't make sense that everything is declining in tandem. Or we're just looking at a lot of unwinding of speculative positions. And I think it's probably a bit of number two and a lot more of number three. But for Australia in particular, it's not a fun prospect to consider that, China isn't going to be what it was in years past. And what it is likely to be in the future, logically, is not necessarily something that Australia would want it to be. But Australia doesn't get any vote in the matter.
Indeed. And China is not just Australia with a larger economy, and it's just a mysterious black box.
To a degree it is. And that's why I'm floating, A or B or C in terms of how one can look at it, or particularly A and B in most cases. But, does one really want to therefore base one's balance sheet on any assumption on a black box? What's your balance sheet going to look like 12 months from now? I don't know. Let's put our hand in the lucky dip and see what comes out. Now, business is like that to a degree always. We know that. That's life. But given that the answer is going to be one you don't want to hear at all, or one that you might like a bit, that really narrows it down. It's not like you put your hand in the drawer and it could be anywhere between 1, which you don't like, and 100, and your break-even point is 30. It's more like one of the numbers is going to be minus 50 and one of them is going to be 25. So which one do you want? It's not going to be a range.
Indeed. And that, again, will create a whole lot of geopolitical tensions right around the world.
Absolutely it will. And I mean, I've been saying similar things to you for years now. This is baked into the cake. Now, a lot of people don't like that cake. They don't want to eat it, and they won't talk about it as a result. But just because we're avoiding the topic, and and some do, doesn't make it go away. Which is one of the reasons why, my job is to continue saying these things, to try and make sure that people consider their risk profile, appropriately.
Indeed. And given that China's unlikely to change any economic policies, we are left with this situation for quite some time.
We are, absolutely. And if we're talking the royal we, and we're talking about Australia and Australia looking at iron ore, then the fact of the matter is, if you get a good year, great, fantastic, bank it. But any government or any institution, any economist who's thinking, well, what's my 5-year forecast for iron ore as a driver of the Australian economy, needs to be looking at it through the lenses of thinking, is China really going to need as much going forward as it has in the past? And is it going to buy it from Australia?
So therefore, any budget has to take all of that into account.
Well, it should do. But then if you look at the stoush that's going on in Australia at the moment over monetary policy, if you start throwing in the fact that fiscal policy is making it up as it goes along as well, then, you know, what anchors do you have? You've got an RBA government stoush where neither side seems to know what they're doing. And, you know, we're implying logically together here a reasonable case for the fact that any budget forecast is just sticking a finger up in the air and hoping. So, yeah, good luck making economic plans on that basis.
And leaves us all wishing we had some of China's deflation.
Well, this is a key point. Now, yes, we're terrified of deflation. If we ever saw in Australia that CPI was going to be negative, particularly on the goods front, you know, from things coming out locally, you know the RBA would be screaming rate cut. You know that they would be. We're terrified of it because obviously we have a debt-based economy and a debt-based financial system, and deflation blows that up. You need constant but moderate inflation to keep pumping new money into the bottom layer of the pyramid. That's how it works. That's a fact. But in China's case, now that they're not really dealing with the market side of things the way they were before, you know, that was a phase and it looks like it's over. Deflation means you've got more purchasing power. If your television was $400 or $4,000 last year and it's $3,000 this year, you're $1,000 better off if you want one. Provided you can stop salaries going down, that's key. If you can stop salaries going down, deflation's wonderful.
Well, Michael, as always, it's fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
So what's happening in the news? Well, the world's economy's tectonic plates will shift this week when a US easing cycle begins, just as officials from Europe to Asia set policy against the backdrop of brittle markets. A 36-hour monetary rollercoaster will start with the Federal Reserve's probable decision to cut interest rates on Wednesday and finish on Friday with the outcome of the Bank of Japan's first meeting since it raised borrowing costs and helped sow the seeds of a global sell-off. Along the way, central banking peers in the Group of 20 and beyond that are poised to adjust their own policy levers, including Brazil, where officials may tighten for the first time in 3.5 years, and the Bank of England. The UK central bank faces a delicate judgment on the pace of its balance sheet unwind and may also signal how ready it is to ease further. The Fed decision will take centre stage, with jittery traders debating whether officials will judge a quarter-point cut to be adequate medicine for an economy showing signs of losing momentum, or whether they'll opt for a half-point move instead. Clues on the Fed's future intentions will also be pivotal, but for all the end to suspense that the US announcement will bring, investors are likely to stay on edge until at least the Bank of Japan is done, in a decision that's bound to be scrutinised for clues on its next hike. And Bill Kelty, one of the architects of Australia's modern prosperity, argues Labor must dramatically reshape its economic agenda to lift productivity and provide greater fairness and opportunity to the younger generation. We need a Labor Party in which the big issues are confronted, he said, describing the Albanese government as instead being mired in mediocrity. The trailblazing trade unionist, who played a crucial role in the 80s and 90s bringing business and the labour movement together to agree on contentious economic reforms, says although Labor has delivered some good policies in its first term, it does not have a plan to revitalise a near-stagnant economy. His wish list includes major tax reform, revised bank lending rules, and an overhaul of Australia's approach to housing, energy and training, among other crucial policy changes. Mr Kelty's enduring faith in reform dynamism reflects the ethos of the Hawke-Keating governments, which, with help from him as Secretary of the Australian Council of Trade Unions, was able to strike a grand bargain between business and unions, including on wages moderation, and to pursue a more entrepreneurial, open economy. Paul Keating is right, Mr Kelty told a private meeting of a small group of Melbourne business leaders this month. The government needs a greater dose of imagination. The Labor Party seems to have lost its way to safely secure 3 terms of government. Mr Kelty's speech to a business lunch attended by former Coalition Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, Tabcorp CEO Gil McLachlan and former Westpac Director Chris Lynch, among others, was made on September the 6th, the day after GDP figures showed Australia growing at its slowest pace since the early 1990s recession. And the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, Simone Constant, is talking about investigations underway into directors and executives at organisations deemed to have neglected their duties to guard against hackers. Constant, a commissioner with ASIC, was willing to puncture the Team Australia balloon and point out that there are still executives and board members paying lip service to the costly and time-consuming demands of ensuring their systems are as safe as possible. And the punishments if these companies end up at the centre of a damaging breach could be steep. While the representative of the corporate regulator declined to name which companies ASIC was investigating, she was more than happy to show off the size of the stick she was wielding. She observed that white-collar crime laws from 2019 included prison terms of up to 15 years for breach of these duties that led to serious harm. It seems unlikely that we will see directors and executives facing jail stretches that long for culpability for hacks, but the message clearly landed heavily with some attendees at a conference she was addressing. ASIC's message to corporate Australia is that if you get caught out by a cyber attack which causes broader harm, directors will not be able to talk their way out of trouble by saying they thought the techies had it covered. We don't want to see the rise of cyber washing. When companies make disclosures, public statements and give assurances about their cyber safety, they need evidence, Constance said. If you're on a board, you need the curiosity and gumption to make executives prove that they aren't doing a poor job on cybersecurity. Don't allow yourself to be told, but insist on being shown. And Commonwealth Bank of Australia is exploring the possibility of replacing thousands of local call centre staff with a ChatGPT-style platform in an expanded use of an artificial intelligence for customers being considered by the country's largest financial institution. The bank is conducting trials of the platform called Hey Bank by testing the technology on employees of the bank who are also customers. The trial is part of a wide range of experiments underway at CBA, which has become the first Australian company to use a so-called AI factory, a cluster of NVIDIA chips that support AI processing, supplied by technology giant Amazon. CBA has long been a tech leader among the major banks and had planned to publicly discuss its intention on AI use in May. But after a trip to the United States, CBA Chief Executive Matt Coman put those plans on hold, saying it had made him think bigger than simply focusing on the very near-term use cases. Outlining how the bank is considering using Hey Bank, CBA Chief Data and Analytics Officer Andrew McMullen said in the future he expected customers would become so familiar with using ChatGPT-style services that it becomes a way that they interact with the bank as well through our digital channels. We're trying to understand what the engagement is like, how those agents would interact with customers, and are making sure that we're very responsible, Dr. McMullen said. We're building the safety guardrails that are required to make sure that these agents can be deployed safely to customers en masse. One way Hey Bank can be used, Dr. McMullen said, would be to tell customers how much they needed to save to buy a house in a certain postcode and what prices would be like. They would receive conversational answers based on internal data. All of CBA's call centre inquiries are now handled by employees in Australia, but the deal with Amazon has already begun to change how the bank operates. Previously, calls were recorded so staff could listen and offer training. Now, AI monitors them. Dr. McMullen said a call could now be converted into a transcript in 1.2 seconds and AI judge the customer's sentiment and whether they had a good experience. The bank says its customer service teams speak to 50,000 customers a day. The bank employs more than 2,400 people in its contact centres, interacting with customers via phone and instant messaging. It is unclear how many of those positions would be under threat with the introduction of AI. Finance Sector Union Assistant Secretary Nicole McPherson said CBA had failed to consult staff and customers before starting this trial, accusing the bank of mimicking a trend of ending customer service roles. She described CBA's plans as disrespectful and tricky and said they should be beneath the country's largest bank. And about 2/3 of Australian baby boomers leaving the workforce don't have enough pension savings to retire comfortably, according to research from the industry's peak body. Slightly more than 30% of Australians are able to afford a comfortable lifestyle in retirement, the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, ASFA, said. The median pension account balance for men aged 60 to 40 sat at $205,385 as of June 2022, $153,685 for women the same age, way off the industry's accepted a comfortable retirement standard of $690,000 for couples and $595,000 for singles. As the nation's pension pools nears $4 trillion, an estimated 2.5 million Australians are expected to retire in the next decade. The pension industry, known locally as superannuation, was made compulsory for all workers in 1992, with contributions equal to 3% of wages. The amount employers contribute has grown to 11.5% and will rise to 12% next year. However, Anxiety around retirement savings persists even as Australia regularly ranks among the world's top pension systems. Some 40% of Australians say they'll never have enough money to retire, despite the country boasting one of the world's most envied pension systems, according to a NACSIS investment managers survey released last week. Lots of people are concerned about the comfort and ability of retirees at the moment because of the cost of living rises. ASFA Chief Executive Officer Mary Delahunty said, "The people retiring now have not had a full benefit for their working life, so they will still require a good level of government help, or help from the rest of us to be able to retire with dignity." Following the planned departure of Nine Entertainment boss Mike Sneesby last week, Nine is now looking at privatising online real estate spin-off Domain, which is 60% owned by Nine. It is understood that Nine has been giving considerable attention to the future of Domain, which is the second largest player in the sector behind REA Group, which is majority owned by News Corp. While REA's market value is about $27 billion, Domain's is only $1.8 billion. Domain shares were about $3.44 4 years ago and are now $2.80. They peaked in 2021 at over $5. Nine, a publisher, broadcaster and digital media business, is understood to be weighing a move to privatise Domain with the help from private equity. Taking Domain off the listed market could boost performance behind closed doors without scrutiny. In its latest result for the year to June, Domain reported a 13.1% increase in revenue for the past financial year to $391.1 million, while net profit increased by 27.9%, excluding significant items, to $49.4 million. And major banks and retailers are discussing ways to minimise the double handling of notes and coins as they plot a more sustainable cash transport industry by installing sophisticated ATMs that combine deposits and withdrawals and simplifying routes serviced by transit trucks. Since the June deal to provide Armaguard with a $50 million financial lifeline to see it through to mid-next year, the Australian Banking Association has been coordinating weekly meetings to flesh out a long-term model for moving cash around the economy in an era of declining volume. The plan will streamline delivery routes, including reducing trucking in and out of Armaguard depots by deploying new technologies that keep cash in branches and on shop floors for longer, before recycling it for new users. The Reserve Bank, Federal Treasury, Australia Post and large retailers are involved in the talks. They're drilling down on changes to cash services in international markets to determine suitable policies for Australia's geography and population. Options being discussed include letting banks and businesses shuffle cash directly without transporting it to a central Armaguard depot. Banks are also exploring rolling out new ATMs that would allow cash to be dispensed from a blended float. Ordinarily, machines keep deposited funds and notes for withdrawal separate, requiring constant replenishing. These are particularly suited to Australia Post branches in regional areas. Smart safes could also be deployed inside big retailers that immediately credit a merchant's bank with funds on deposit while cash is stored on site. Currently, banks have to move cash to a depot before it can earn interest, complicating the chain of custody. The ABA, RBA and Treasury officials visited Europe in May to study alternative models for cash services. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission last week provided authorisation for the ABA, Australia Post, retailers, supermarkets and other industry participants to continue collaborating to ensure there is continuity of cash in transit services. The ABA has agreed to provide regular reports to the ACCC about the talks. In Australia, the use of cash for payments has declined by 10% each year for the past 15 years to 13% of all transactions in 2022. This has increased the unit costs of moving it around, given fixed costs are high, but delivery and pickup involves volume-based contracts. Cash payments have fallen from about 70% in 2007 to 13%, but cash pickups and drop-offs remain almost unchanged, said ABA Chief of Policy Christopher Taylor. With rising costs and shrinking demand, the current model is rapidly becoming unsustainable. The challenges of declining cash use are not used to Australia. We need to develop an Australian solution that ensures efficient cash access and cost-effective delivery of cash in transit services, especially for regional and remote areas. Smart ATMs are now widely used in Europe, including by ATM utilities Geldmat in the Netherlands and Bankomat in Sweden. According to a report by McKinsey for the ABA, cash recycling machines have reduced cash transport volumes in Sweden by 50%, while smart safes in the United States have reduced cash pickups between 50 and 60%. The cost to service remote areas is higher because of the distances travelled. In a particular town, larger businesses and banks take excess cash to Armaguard depots, but nearby businesses simply order more cash. It would be more efficient if businesses could transact with each other without it going through a depot. Banks and retailers are also exploring standardising delivery routes to branches in a suburb or town to service them all on the same day. Similarly, all shops in a central mall would be served on the same day, reducing overlap. The way it is delivered will be standardised too, instead of bespoke tubes or rolled coins. Streamlining the industry may also require changes at the RBA, which only pays interest on money held in a depot. This is incentivising depot trips rather than keeping cash circulating in the community. The RBA may be asked to reconsider its approach. Banks and retailers will regularly update the Reserve Bank on proposals to put the distribution of cash on a sustainable footing before emergency funding expires in July 2025, Mr Taylor said. A Melbourne-based startup Helfie AI is working on software that will be able to screen for skin cancer and COVID-19 through a smartphone app. Helfie was founded in 2019 by George Tomeski, Matt Jones and Nick Chang. Jones and Chang are no longer with the company, the former going on to found a Blackbird-based wellness booking venture and the latter joining a cryptocurrency exchange. Tomeski is Helfie's chief executive. Helfie claims to be able to do some incredible things with its artificial intelligence, including testing for COVID-19 and tuberculosis via users recording a cough on their phones, skin cancer checks with a phone camera scan, and STI checks via a chatbot called STIA, which it says is 96% accurate. Its technology, which is being tested and due to be launched in the coming months, focuses on screening diseases rather than diagnosis, referring users to medical professionals. Royal Mail Health in Britain is among its customers, while Microsoft has added to its startups program, which gives the company access to the tech giant's cloud computing platform. To date, Helfie has largely been backed by family and friends. Its shareholder register also shows investment from CW Retail, a company owned by Chemist Warehouse, which counts billionaire businessmen Jack Gance and Mario Verrocchi as its major backers. Helfie has also attracted some heavy hitters to its boards, including Moderna Therapeutics founding Chief Science Officer Tony Figueroles, recognised as a pioneer of modified mRNA as a vaccine, Cheryl Buxton, the former chairwoman of pharmaceuticals and R&D at global recruiting giant Korn Ferry. However, it is now gearing up for discussions with local and international investors and hoping to raise more than US $100 million, that's $150 million Aussie, and up to $300 million, giving it a valuation of about US $1 billion, even before its consumer-facing product is on market. Last year, it raised US $33 million at a valuation of US $750 million. And that's it for this week. And next week, I'll be talking to Joel Delmare, the Chief Product Officer for recruitment software company JobAdder, about how businesses should manage the risks around artificial intelligence and the issues around legislation that will not restrict innovation. And I'll talk to Indeed economist Callum Pickering about the latest unemployment figures. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from my website, leongettler.com. If you like Talking Business, please leave us a review with Apple Podcasts. Thank you in advance. In the meantime, you can catch me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you want, leave a comment. If you want to contact me, email me at leon@leongettler.com. I answer all emails. Also, in my spare time, I have a copywriting business. If anyone needs newsletters, blogs, articles or advertorial, email me. Wishing you all a safe and healthy week and looking forward to bringing you Talking Business next week.